a mental performance director at IMG years ago. He said that for every negative thought that we have, we need to integrate or inject 7 positive thoughts just to be on an equal standing. So you can think of it like this. For every negative thought you have, it's equivalent to 7 positive thoughts. Meaning, your negative thoughts are 7 times more powerful and likely to take priority in your mind than your positive, productive thoughts. Which is why if you go into pressure situations without a clear plan or system about what you're going to think about, then you can imagine that your negative and unproductive thoughts will take priority because of its increased power. That's very useful to know. And it's exactly why you need to plan what you're going to think about under pressure. Because if you don't plan what you're going to think about under pressure, then the negative and unproductive thoughts are what's most likely going to arise on its own. And this is why you see most people are not effective under pressure. And that's something very useful to know when you're an underdog. Because when you're playing a favorite, they're facing more pressure than you are. And you should understand that people never or rarely perform at their highest levels under overwhelming amounts of pressure. So that hopefully that gives you more confidence when you're in an underdog type position to understand that due to the increased pressure on the favorite, the playing grounds are actually a more even playing field than you think. But you just have to operate the competition with that mindset. People aren't aware of that, and so they tend to overplay, and that's actually what lets the favorites off the hook. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here, and we have to get through a lot of points to get through today. So, okay, understand this. Under pressure, to be spontaneous or to wing it or to be creative is not, from a research standpoint, the most effective strategy forward. Because psychologically, we tend to not be very effective thinking in complex thought processes under pressure. We're much better with simple, straightforward strategies. So what you're not trying to, if you're trying to optimize your performance, wing the pressure moments or do actions that you haven't pre-trained or programmed. You're much better off being disciplined, simple, and leaning on what you've done the most. Okay, if you want to give yourself the percentages to be effective under pressure. So you need a system and a plan for the pressure moments. You can't go in there winging it and hoping for creative inspiration. It's psychologically very unlikely to be effective. Okay, so now knowing we need a plan under pressure. Okay, you need to create a plan for your pressure moments. You have to think, okay, when I get into these pressure moments, this is what I'm going to do. And you want to make that plan as simple and straightforward as possible. Okay, raise your hand if you are following thus far and you're on board. Okay, we need to actually pre-train how we're going to handle those moments. Okay, like a decider in a match or a competition. Okay, we need to prepare for those moments because you're very likely to be ineffective just showing up and having the moment go well. You just better hope that your opponent's done the same, which likely they have. They probably haven't planned under pressure. Okay, so here's the next thing that we need to understand in order to perform more effectively under pressure. Value restructuring. Okay. Under pressure, And when I speak about that, it's mostly external. So it's coming from the outside. So you've got an increase of pressure coming from the outside. So how do you balance that out? You have to figure out how to release the pressure intrinsically or internally so that you can manage it and so that it doesn't overwhelm you. So how do we do that? Value restructuring, as is the name of this topic that we're now going to go through. Value restructuring. And you have to understand this deeply. This is valuing your character and your process over the result. So you need to go under pressure with the thought or the idea that whatever happens is less important than how I approach it. Meaning, I can fail or lose the outcome. I'm okay with that. How I fail or lose the outcome is going to mean everything to me. Choose to be courageous, even if it means losing. Choose your character over the win or the loss. Choose the process. Choose doing the right thing over trying to control the win or the loss. In other words, care more about your character and doing the right things, whether that's tactically, technically, mentally, over winning or losing. That's something you really have to be intentional about and practice. Because if you decide to value something which you can control, your character or process, and you say that's the most important thing to me, all you have to execute is something you have full control over. Like you have full control over your character and your approach towards what you're facing, but you don't have control over the outcome always. Things happen. And so to put your value in something that you can't control the outcome, it's not a reliable source. And it actually, interestingly enough, is going to be the reason why you're more likely to not achieve the outcome. Because you're trying to control something you can't control. And so while you're in the moment and you see it going in an unfavorably way, you're disappointed. And then you see it going in a favorable way, you're happy. You're going through an emotional roller coaster. When you choose to go into high pressure, valuing something that you can control, character and process, you don't go through the emotional up and down that others experience who hyper focus on winning or losing. Okay, so now great. In theory, that all sounds amazing. Focus on your character and process over the results. But that's a lot harder done than to say, right? It's not easy to choose that. Again, going into our first point, why is it not easy to choose our character and our process over results? And I'll tell you why. Because under pressure, like I said earlier, we tend to fall back on more simple, straightforward, programmed thinking. Okay, it's that whole Daniel Kahneman theory written in How to Think Fast and Slow. Right? It's why they train the military in their high pressure stakes moments they have to face to really be simple. It's simple directions. It's a simple process. Because you understand the performance psychology. Okay, so sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit there. Okay, so how do we actually execute valuing our character and process over the results? Again, if we show up in the moment without a plan, we're going to default our thought process to the more negative, unproductive thoughts, which in this case would be the results. We're much more likely to not be able to execute value and character and process if we just show up and then decide in the moment to do that. It's too hard. In order to effectively value character and process, you have to really take the time prior to that pressure situation or that competition to intentionally program inside of you that my goal today, and you have to really care deeply about it and set the intention, my number one goal is today is to value my character and process only, regardless of the results. Regardless of the results. That gives you the best chance to actually execute that. And then as a result, I said, the result comes organically when you value character and process, because character and process is the how to achieve the result. The result is just the result. The character and the process actually helps you achieve the result, and it's totally in your control. But you have to understand that you can do the character and process to the best of your ability, and the result still doesn't come your way, and you have to be okay with that. All you need to care about is your character and process, and you have to really practice and get good at only caring about your character and process. So you walk off your competition and you lost, but you ask yourself, did I have the right character and mentality? Yeah, I really did today. Good. Did I do the right tactical execution strategy? Yeah, I really did. Good. That's good. That's it. That's what we care about. That takes a mature, long-term thinker. And because as we're young, our prefrontal cortex isn't as developed, it's a lot harder. You have to get ahead of that curve. That takes more effort and intentional conscious practice to counteract your youth. It's technically true that as we get older, because of the development of our prefrontal cortex, we're better at long-term type thinking, so less hedonistic type thinking, which is what is required to actually value character or process. It's not the immediate reward that results are. And so you kind of have to know that if you're young, and the younger you are, if you want to do a better job of executing that, to the extent of your youth is the extent you have to practice it more intentionally and consciously. And of course, it's like the day of the competition, to set the intention of I'm going to value character and process, it's very unlikely that in the competition that you're going to do that. It's not trained enough. You have to set that intention for months. Specifically, if you actually want the performance science, the average would be 66 days. You'd have to practice that for 66 days for it to become a programmed habit. So for 66 days, you go to practice valuing character and process over results. And that would be what most likely shows up in the competition and helps you manage pressure much better than everybody else. I know this is a little bit fast and complex, which we're talking about today, but really try to lock in and pay attention here. Raise your hand if we're following right now. Okay. So, first point that we've reviewed so far is under pressure, we need systems and a plan. We need a plan and a system of what we're going to do under pressure. Do not be spontaneous and say, when I get in that moment, I'm going to wing it. It might work, but most of the time, it's not going to be your most effective strategy forward. Second point, restructuring of values. Become someone who values their character and process over results, and you'll find that's actually the best thing to do. That's actually the best thing you could do to more effectively execute under pressure and get the results you want as a result. Okay, we're going to move on here. In some ways, guys, and I'm going to explain this further so it's not misinterpreted eventually through this class, but so many people get tight and choke under pressure. Why? Because they want to win. They want to win so bad that they start to get tight and choke. So we know that trying to control the win equates to tightness and nerves. So reverse engineer the equation. Perhaps when you release or you become more okay with the result not going your way, you actually free yourself up to win. Like, a lot of people don't win because they're trying to control the win, and that's where the tightness and the nerves comes in. Perhaps if you became okay with the results you didn't want, you actually could free yourself up, right? You wouldn't experience that tightness or nerves, and you might actually perform more effectively because of that. So in some ways, to accept the loss is to free yourself up for the win. Okay. That's something to think deeply about. And maybe even question, is that true? That could be your guys' homework that you could give me for next week in an email. And again, I don't want you to agree with everything. I want you to think critically about what I'm saying. Is it true that when I try to control the win, I experience more tightness and nerves? Yes, no, let's say yes. Then is it true that if I released the win, if I maybe even became okay with the loss, that I wouldn't experience those tightness and nerves that actually negatively affect my performance? That would be your topic to debate through your homework with me for next week. Now, understand this, and I need to be a little bit more specific here. A certain amount of stress and care for the result is good for you. We know that, right? Stress is actually what helps you a certain amount. Okay, I'm talking about we need to get away from an overwhelming amount of pressure and stress. We need to find the sweet spot, the balance, because that will help our focus, our alertness, our motivation, our drive, right? Because it's a goal, right? You need a goal. You need a goal, technically speaking, to experience the dopaminergic effects that make you perform better. Okay, so that's separate here. So I'm glad I cleared that up. Okay, I want to quickly try to go through these points here with the underdogs and the favorite, okay? So imagine you're an underdog, okay? You experience less pressure than your opponent as the underdog. They have more pressure to win because of their expectations. So they're experiencing more pressure than you. You could use that knowledge to understand that that's your advantage. And if you understood, not that that was true, but how to use that piece of knowledge to your advantage, you begin to even the playing field. So then there is no favorites or underdogs. But people that aren't aware of that, or the underdogs that aren't aware of that, they don't realize that the pressure that the favorite has on them is affecting their performance. They don't realize that. And so they just think that the favorite is better than them. And so when you think that somebody's better than you, people tend to overplay. And in that process of overplaying as the underdog, you're playing at a capacity that's outside your limits that you're not trained or comfortable with. And so errors start to arise because of the increased risk you're taking. And most of the time, if you evaluate and you observe, that's actually what lets the favorites off the hook. And I kind of briefly went over this earlier in this class. Perhaps if you understood that the playing field is actually more even than you think because they have the increased pressure on themselves, you might say, oh, well, strategically it makes sense to not overplay. Because I experience less pressure than they are. I'm experiencing less pressure than they are. So they're going to perform worse than their capability, and I might actually perform better than my capability. So even playing field, I don't need to overplay. And as a result of that, you make less of the careless, simple errors that let a favorite off the hook. Raise your hand if you follow that. That's very interesting and useful knowledge to have. Now, let's talk about being a favorite. Most of my life, except when I went on the pro tour, I would say, I experienced this side of the coin. And it's so interesting because, yeah, the amount of pressure that you feel as the favorite is unbelievable. And imagine, like, if you're the number one player in the country, every single person you play in the country, you're expected on paper to beat. You know how much pressure that is? It's an overwhelming amount of pressure most of the time. Of course, as the number one player in the country, you should never let anybody know that. Luckily, like, I'm retired, so I don't care. I'm going to let you know. You should know this so you can hopefully be in that position. And so that's a lot to deal with. And I remember, okay, so I'm going to go into an anecdote here. In my senior year at Indiana, I was playing number one for the team, and it was my final year. And I was feeling a lot of pressure. Maybe the most pressure I'd experienced in my career that year. Because there's a real certain time clock. At least when you're playing pro, like, you retire on your terms, And I remember the schedule came out, and we were playing a team we should crush and dominate. But, I was playing the number one position, and every number one on a, NCAA D1 team has a capacity to be an unbelievable player. So I felt all that pressure, and I was trying to figure out how to manage it, because the schedule came out like, it's not like a tournament draw where it comes out on a Friday and a Saturday. Like, the season schedule comes out in the preseason. So I have like 3 months to just go crazy. Like, oh my God. And I called, the best decision I ever made, I accidentally made it, is I called a friend and mentor, Matt Brooklyn. He was the assistant coach at San Diego, and he was the former number one player at UCLA. So I knew he had experienced the position I was in before, that kind of favorite mindset. And what's so funny is that I played Matt Brooklyn when I was 14 years old in a prize money event, and he was much older than me. So he experienced a lot of pressure having to play a 14-year-old, and I was quite a feisty competitor. And I actually got up 4-0 on him. And I asked him, I said, Matt, how did you not panic when 14-year-old me, and you'd already finished your career as the number one player at UCLA, got up 4-0 on you? And he said, and this is something that I carried for the rest of my career and that I share with all the high performers that I come across at some point in their career, if I get the chance to. He said this, I understood one thing. It's one thing for an underdog to get a lead over a favorite. It's another thing for them to have the guts to close them out. If the underdog has the guts to close the favorite out, wow, too good, you deserve the win. But most of the time, they'll get the lead, especially in a sport where there's no time clock. They'll get the lead, they'll panic because, oh my God, I have the lead over a great player right now, and then they'll self-destruct. You just can't panic in that moment. Because if you panic when the underdog gets the lead, then you self-destruct and you give them the win. You can't panic. When they get the lead, you have to maintain your composure and let them self-destruct. And 90% of the time, they will. And that was Nothing was calming me that whole preseason. And that piece of knowledge that, Coach Matt Brooklyn shared with me, it's like, whoa, that's so true. Released all this pressure. Sometimes you need to find the solution to your problems in order to be in a better headspace. Don't just stop at the problem. Obsessively find the solution to your problems. Okay. It's really important that's a good question. I ended up losing that match. He was absolutely right. That's why I asked him, how did you not panic in that moment and end up winning? Because most people would be like thinking about the end of the world in that moment, I was a former number 1 player at UCLA. How am I down 4-0 to a 14, 15-year-old? They would go in such a negative spiral. But that's where, experience and knowledge and clear thinking and a pre-plan really helps you through. Okay. When Navy SEALs go on their mission, it's very dangerous to not prepare for worst-case scenarios. Because it's so threatening to their livelihood. They can't afford to not have covered the worst-case scenario. Because if in the moment of execution, something unexpected comes up and they're not prepared, under that overwhelming amount of stress and pressure, it could be a very big disaster. And this is where this saying, expect the worst but believe in the best, is true. Believe in your capabilities, but be prepared for everything to go wrong. That way, if something goes wrong, you're not wasting time being shocked or startled. You're just in I planned for this. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Again, that's the pre-plan under pressure. So in preparation and training, you have to run through all of the worst case scenarios so that if it happens in the heat of the moment, you don't waste time in panic or shock. It's as simple of, all good, I planned for this. Okay, here's what I do. That gives you the best chance of having success under the pressure of the unplanned disaster. So you can imagine this in a competitive sense. Like, you need to go into every competition or game with almost an expectation of like, they could play lights out and I could be just feeling terrible. I mean, I could wake up with a stomach ache. I could have a wrist pain. Here's what I'm going to do if that happens. Here's what I'm going to do if they're playing lights out. Here's what I'm going to do if I go down in the scoreboard. So you have a plan for the worst case moments. But let me differentiate. Expecting the worst is different than, and should be different than, the impact it has on your confidence. That's where I say believe in the best. You have to believe that you're someone capable of overcoming and rising above every worst case scenario that comes about. And that you have to believe in your ability to get the job done. So it's this, I'm prepared for anything that comes my way, and I believe I'm the guy or the girl who can get the job done. I believe in my abilities. Expect the worst, believe in the best. Okay, I'm watching the time clock here because I'm really trying hard to get through everything. Okay. Technically speaking, why do people experience disappointment? technically, think about that, guys. Why do people experience disappointment? Okay, so technically, people experience disappointment when reality is lower than their expectations. So when reality is lower than their expectations, so when you have an expectation and reality is less than the expectation, people technically experience disappointment or frustration. On the other hand, when reality is higher than the expectation, what do people experience? Joy, thrill, positive emotion. Expect the worst, believe in the best. Okay, so knowing this technical piece of information that when people experience frustration or disappointment is when reality is lower than expectation. So imagine in the sense of a meal, it's like, tonight I'm having pizza, and then your like least favorite meal comes forward. You're really disappointed. But if you expect, your least favorite meal and then pizza comes, you're super happy and joyed. And while you're super happy and joyful, you're experiencing positive emotion. Now, in a previous lecture, we talked about the importance of experiencing positive emotion. Now, we know this. We experience most of our positive emotion in life in relation to making progress towards a goal. That's technically true. So what happens in some ways, you can think of it as like this, like what you set your expectation as, in some ways, is the goal. That's the goal. And when reality is less than the goal, you don't experience that positive emotion. Remember, you experience positive emotion in relation to making progress towards a goal. So when reality is above expectation, you're technically making progress, greater progress than even the goal. So you feel elevated heights of joy and just overall generically or generally positive emotion. Okay, so now we know this. Okay. We know performance is elevated when people are experiencing positive emotion. So put a pin in that. We know performance is enhanced when people experience positive emotion. When people experience making progress towards the goal. We know that. It's state of mind, right? You can imagine who is performing better, someone frustrated or disappointed, or somebody in that joyful, thrilled mood. Well, along with the positive emotion comes a ton of psychological and physiological benefits. Okay, so again, I know this is going to get a little complex, but follow. We experience the dopaminergic response. What is that? Dopamine, the neurochemical for motivation, drive, and focus. We also experience an analgesic response. What is that? The ability to withstand discomfort and pain. So as you experience the more positive emotion you experience, the more motivation, drive, focus, ability to withstand discomfort and pain. Those are performance enhancers. We don't experience those performance enhancers in frustration and disappointment. When do we experience frustration and disappointment? When reality is lower than the expectation. Right? We're disappointed and frustrated when we expect the pizza, but vegetables come for dinner. And then we, as a result, actually enjoy the vegetables less than we would have if we thought that, what's something worse than vegetables? if we thought that something worse than vegetables was coming. If we thought that something worse than vegetables was coming for dinner, the vegetables would taste better. Why? Because of your state of mind. You're experiencing the positive emotion of, oh my God, thank God it wasn't something worse than vegetables. I know that's a lot, and you know, you really have to pay attention to get what I'm saying. So here's what we can take away from this knowledge if you are following. As a performer, we should work really, really, really hard. Technically speaking, to expect less. We should expect less, technically. But I'm not going to stop there. You should invest more. Invest more in your character and process. Invest and expect less in results. Why? Because people, first of all, that invest less in the character and process are not doing what it takes to get better results. So people, and people that invest more in the results simultaneously are investing less in character and process, which is what it takes to get results. So they invest and expect more in the results, and they invest less in what it takes to get the result. And then what happens is their reality is less than their expectation. The results that they're invested in or expecting, it doesn't come to fruition because they invest less in what it takes to get the results. So what we should really take on as a motto as a performer is we are going to invest more in what it takes to get the results and expect less in the result. If you were to put all your priority and emphasis in your character and your process, which is what it takes to get the result, you would then get way better results. And if you expected less results and you put more of your focus on the character and process, when you got better results than you expected, you would experience greater amounts of positive emotion, which releases the dopaminergic and analgesic properties, gives you more motivation, drive, focus, ability to withstand discomfort, and pain tolerance, to name a few, along with enthusiasm, energy, right? Like, okay. So let me just make this very simple and try to say it in 10 words. Put it like this. Invest more in your process and care less about the results that comes through that process. Care less about results, invest more in what it takes to get the results. If you did this, you would accidentally experience results you would never have dreamed of. You'd find unimaginable. They would organically come to you. The results would, instead of you chasing the results, the results would chase you. Another book you could think about reading, and I've talked about this one often, is Man's Search for Meaning. In the what do you call it? In the foreword, or no, in the introduction, he literally talks about this. Success is not to be pursued, it's what ensues. Did everybody follow that lesson? Raise your hand if you did. Okay, good, because I know that was kind of a lot. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 more simple points that are going to help you be effective under pressure. It's an interesting one. But when you're experiencing extreme amounts of, yes, the book is by Viktor Frankl. Yeah, you got that right. When you're experiencing overwhelming amounts of stress or pressure, to practice having a sense of humor in those moments. A lot of people point to the reality of that, when I'm using a lot of the Navy SEAL example today because it's very useful. But as if you account for the observations of Navy SEALs, they'll tell you that sometimes on the way to battle, they were cracking jokes. Significant amount of pressure. And they're managing that pressure through a sense of humor and laughter. Well, again, we know that laughter, and I've written about this, it has analgesic properties. So the ability to withstand discomfort and pain. What is significant amounts of pressure? It's discomfort. To laugh or to have a sense of humor in high pressure moments releases these analgesic properties, which technically help you manage the stress and the pressure better. So like, for example, when you're in training and you're doing that hardcore plank and you got to get to 5 minutes, like somebody says something funny, like, laugh and you'll find, it makes it a little bit more manageable. So, can you have a sense of humor in your times of tragedy, pressure, discomfort? I think that would be not a as basic as it sounds, it's not a bad tool for managing pressure, guys. Having a sense of humor in your moments of, pressure. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to introduce before we open it up to final thoughts and questions. Okay. What we need to do to effectively perform under pressure is we need to have a better control of our thoughts, right? Because under pressure, what tends to happen is that our thoughts take control of us because of the significance of the moment, which is what I've explained earlier, right? Like, whether we mean to or not, we tend to fall back to what's been programmed inside of us. So the thoughts take control of us, right? Like, our instinctual reaction to the moment is what arises, and we're no longer choosing what we want to arise. Creating a plan for the pressure moment that we're going to put our full focus on certainly helps, as we've discussed earlier. But if you're serious about becoming an elite performer under pressure, then that means that you're seriously in need of practicing the control of your thoughts. What better way to do that through the practice of meditation, which is to literally work on gaining a better control of your mind. And a lot of the pros or elite performers, and not even just in the athletic world, but even in the corporate world that I've talked to, if you're ever interested in, are using this app called Waking Up by Sam Harris. It's not time consuming, but I've actually and I've spoken with a lot of people, and the feedback has been that after about 3 months or so, they're like, whoa, I would have reacted angry in that moment, and I didn't. They had a better control of themselves and their thoughts. Under pressure, we want to react in the way that we need to react. We want to choose our emotional or our response. That means that we have to be great at being able to do that. And I think that meditation is a great practice to get better at that, guys. So if you want a practice field to have better control of your thoughts in a non-time consuming way, as I know we've all got a lot going on, This waking up app is like 10 minutes a day that you could do. 10 minutes. And like I said, a lot of the feedback I got was that after about 3 months of practicing, they really felt, whoa, I have more control of myself under pressure. And I'm not just reacting, I'm actually choosing my response to moments. Okay, I'm going to end my part of the lecture there, as I know we went through a lot, and I didn't take participation in this lecture. So I'll give 10 minutes now for final thoughts, questions. I know that was a lot to digest, but it was important for me to lay that all out there in the time length that we had. Okay, I'm going to open up for thoughts. Organize your thoughts, ask questions, discuss. Okay. Go ahead, Karen.
So basically, what you're trying to say is that we should focus more on what we can control, rather what we cannot control, which are the results when we're going into a tournament. So our mental state isn't like going up and down.
Absolutely. Yeah, because if it's uncontrollable, it's like a stock. It's going up and down, and you're going up and down with it. It's much better to go into an already uncertain environment with some forms of certainty. What can you be certain about? You can be certain about your body language. You can be certain about your tactical plan. I'm going to, I don't know, try to find, in tennis terms, try to find my forehand and take it to their backhand when I get it. Like actually have a plan that's within your actually emphasize that which is within your control and you can execute. And if you execute it correctly, then you've done your job. Is that good? Okay, go ahead,